Everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. Looking at Michael's Homelite Super XL here. I had to go back through my notes and recall what it is we had going on. Excuse me. And this one, he was working on it, had some runnability issues, and got it down to clean it out, and he noticed a cylinder nut that's loose. Now that is not something that's terribly common on these saws. It's, like I say, I don't find that very often. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever seen one just magically come loose on its own. But if it's created an air leak there, that certainly would explain all of the runnability issues. So let's get into it. Real trick, even if the cylinder gasket was bad, that's no huge deal. Because getting to that's not nearly as difficult as if, say, the crankcase gasket was bad. Which one? Now I'm guessing. Not sure which one it was he had noticed. That's interesting. Well, that's okay. We'll still get into it. I'm going to do a little cleanup around some of this that I see. Maybe get the flywheel out of the way, we'll see. But we'll come back when I know something a little bit better. Okay. Went back and double checked my email and verified where that loose nut is. It's actually on the muffler side, but yep, there it is, alright. Isn't that special? Look at that. I think you can see it right there. And you cannot get to that with the fuel tank in place. Now, if we're lucky, let's see, if that crankcase gasket isn't jacked up, and we don't have any reason to believe it is, we can just go ahead and pull this fuel tank, and we'll have access to that nut. That'll, of course, give us an opportunity to further clean. Oh, now, see, look at all that crap. All that buildup from over the years. That's all got to get cleaned out. In fact, I want to do... Damn it. Things are built well. I want to do that before going any further on this. So once again, so the main symptom, problem, whatever you want to call it, on this saw was that it wouldn't rev up when the trigger was pulled. Now that can be a sign of an air leak. I mean, it can be a sign of carburetor issues. And you can be damn certain I'm going to go through the carb. But we're right here. And we know that that nut is loose. That implies that somebody's probably been in here at some point. So to me, that says we're going to do an inspection. Look at that. Zero effort at all. Now, that took no effort. There was no torque on that. Now again, Homelite wasn't the best at publishing specs for these. I think in one of the service manuals there's probably an inch-pound rating for these nuts, but if you've done any wrenching at all, you can kind of get a feel for what's appropriate for a 1/4 inch nut, which is what this is. It's a 1/4 inch fine thread nut. it isn't hard to torque this right. And that wasn't either. I will say the lock washers were compressed, but whoop-de-doo. I mean, that doesn't take any effort at all. That's only, I'm going to say 10 or 20 inch-pounds at best. Yeah, I mean, this is loose. Yeah, no bueno. That's just not cool. So it's possible this has never been apart and those slowly worked loose over the years from being improperly torqued. I have my doubts of that. I have serious doubts of that. I think somewhere along the line somebody was in this and just didn't quite have a feel for how tight these needed to be. So in a way, it's a miracle the thing's not burned up. There's no sign of scoring through the muffler port, which is good. Okay. Not bad. All the hardware corralled here. This all needs to be dried out, blown out, cleaned up, what have you, but for the inspection purpose, we're okay. There is nothing, not even too much carbon buildup. So that'll get cleaned out and it'll be fine. The piston, crankcase looks good. Now, that whole gasket is greasy. Normally, you can reuse these. These red gaskets are the best there are out there, and I don't like destroying them. I'm going to take this one off, and I'm going to show you guys why we're not going to reuse it. They're far superior to the later black ones. Of course, you want the real honest truth. This red gasket probably contains asbestos. That's why it's better. So this is backed by metal similar to a head gasket, you know, like on a car. But look how much metal is showing through there. The black sealing surface is pretty uniformly gone around here, which again tells me that that leaked for quite a while, and the carburetor was probably tuned richer than hell to try and compensate. But up top, where you've got your airbox seal at the intake right there, looks the way it should. That's not cool. That wouldn't seal up properly. So there was just years of blow-by of fuel, and who knows, this thing could have had some micro vibrations moving back and forth. I mean, look at the imprint that it left on the cylinder itself. I mean, it actually wore into the cylinder. So that's interesting. You know, I'm going to wire wheel on the bench grinder this surface, and hopefully, I think a new red cylinder gasket will be just fine. I'll hopefully have one of those rattled away somewhere. But I'm going to guess that was the biggest air leak problem. So I'm going to keep going through this saw. If I come up with anything else, I'll flip the camera back on for noteworthy stuff. But I think this is a cut and dry case of just improperly torqued cylinder nuts. Let this thing slowly loosen over the years and destroy this gasket, and that would be why it wouldn't hold a rev in all likelihood. Okay, so as I suspected, it did leave some imprint in that cylinder base, but with a good gasket, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I'm not going to worry about it until I need to worry about it, let's put it that way. Yeah, so I could see evidence of micro movement of the cylinder. I mean, not just that little wear pattern from the gasket, but also on the skirt of the piston. It's not scored yet, but you know how you can see where something has had just a little bit of friction in aluminum. Not where it digs a gouge in it yet, but you can just see it. I noticed that, and that would have definitely been an indication of micro movements. As that thing's moving up and down, it should be held in that cylinder. It should be a consistent same path every single time. When those nuts are loose, it's going to be a little bit different every time. So the wear would be where the transfer ports are machined out, and you've got that little thin strip of cylinder left that's guiding the piston. So just something to, as you're understanding these saws and what they do and why they do it, that's something to keep in mind, is that where those transfer ports are, whether it be exhaust or intake, that's going to be the weakest part of the support for the piston, where those are machined out and you've just got little strips of, plated aluminum that's left there. So anyhow, I didn't see anything that gave me the heebie-jeebies, so we're putting it back together. Wanted to make a note, the cylinder is not easily accessible. I mean, it just isn't. So on these two, on the muffler side, these two nuts, what you want to do is get it in place, slip your washer on, slip the nut in there, and then get them started, both of these, before you tighten it down very far. This side, you got wide open access. It's not a big deal. But there's not enough room to get the nut in here if you've already got it tightened down to the base. You're not going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and get these quote-unquote finger tight. I think back in the day, Homelite offered a thinner profile 7/16 wrench. I'm going to see how this one tightens. I'm seeing something that I didn't notice before. I almost think I see the cylinder stud moving a little bit. Let's see if this one does it too. That one's not. I don't think it is. Maybe it's my eyeballs. I'll get these tightened down and see if I like it. I'm at the point right now that if I didn't like something, it wouldn't be that difficult to get it back off and take care of it. Although, that was just my eyeball. At least I'm pretty sure it was. Anyway, they offered a lower profile 7/16 wrench. Now you could probably modify your existing one so that the box end would actually fit in here. But I don't know, because there's not a whole lot of clearance around those cylinder fins. You just kind of got to work around the oil lines and what you got here. It's not fun. And you definitely can't do it on the saw. There's just not enough machining tolerance. The super later versions of these things, so we're talking early to late 90s, for that final run of the special edition saws, they actually downsized these to a 3/8 nut. Still, went over a quarter thread, so there wasn't as much thread holding power there, or the nut wasn't as strong, but at least with that, you could get in here. But good luck. I don't think that revised part is all that common, and it just takes you a little extra time. Now, I'm not torquing any of these yet. This is a thick aluminum base on the cylinder, and I don't think you could warp it. But I don't want to be the one to make that discovery that, oh, hey, by the way, you can warp it. Not my idea of fun. Yeah, see, these you could even get a extension and a socket on this side. All right. Okay, those. I think I've already got them tighter right there than they were when I started. And that's not nearly tight enough. Those would just rattle right loose again. So we'll start with the hardest one here. And you've got to play the game of flip sides, and so I've got a good bite there. And that felt decent, but it's not enough. So I'm going to go as far as I can, come back up, get a new bite. Okay. In all likelihood, that torque is a little more than maybe what Homelite recommended. But again, I'm not measuring. I don't have wrenches that measure inch-pounds, nor do I honestly care. Again, it's a thick flange. I'm not going to strip anything out. But I want these tight enough that we're not going to have a problem. And I can honestly say I've never had a cylinder nut rattle loose on one I've worked on. So, I'm going to give it the tightness that I know a 1/4 inch stud can handle. Alright, good. We're there. I can see no indication of leakage around that crankcase gasket. I have no reason to believe it's leaking. I'm going to run it. I'm going to get this thing put back together. I still need to clean that ignition out. That is covered in junk. The pictures that Michael sent me, he was in this. That's how he discovered that loose nut. Trying to figure out what was going on, and he did a phenomenal job of cleaning with what he had to work with and how far he had the saw disassembled. This was another one that was just junked up beyond belief. And if it was leaking fuel around the cylinder base, like I know that it was, again, the flywheel bringing the sawdust and the air in is going to disperse that. And that fuel, that's how this stuff gets caked, whether it's a leaking fuel hose, a carburetor that's leaking, you know, one of these leaks, crank seal, you know, anything's possible. But, yeah. So, I think I'll go ahead and just get this put back together and come back for a test run. Okay, everything's back together. You can get the spark plug in. It took a little more. No big surprise. Got into the carburetor, and these SDCs have a check valve on the high-speed side, just like the HDCs, and this one appeared to be bad. It's hard to get that Welch plug drilled out without damaging it, but I couldn't even find any trace of it left in there, and that would definitely explain the lack of rev. Because what that check valve does is it prevents crankcase pulses from coming back into the carburetor and disrupting the flow of fuel. So that totally tracks for me. Needed another wrap on the starter cord, duckbill valve, and the cap. And the points needed filed in the worst way. They would barely spark on that CJ6, but they wouldn't spark at all on the tester. Once I got those filed and gapped, good to go. So with any luck, we'll have a successful test run here. It's a good sign. Okay. It's got to be close. Retuning a saw after you've had a event like the cylinder coming loose, to where it's probably been slowly gotten out of tune over time. It's a little bit of a dance to get it back where it belongs. I had it a little too lean there initially, but I'd taken a guess. So, think I'm pretty comfortable with this. I'm going to give it the 2-day sit test. Only other thing I need to work through, I don't know if this happened in shipping or what, but the lower handle bracket here is all flattened out. I mean, it was flatter than that. I just bent it out of the way enough that I could actually get to the screws here, but need to reform that and remove it and put it in the bag with the handle that's still in the box there. But I want to let this sit for a couple of days and just make sure all the tuning's right, and then it starts again. But I'd say I'm 95% certain that we're there. So with any luck, this will be heading home soon.